it's important that we're serving not only that Irish-speaking audience, which obviously is our key audience, there's a whole English-speaking audience out there that Russell Roon has.
On this debut episode of Garry Talks film, I'm joined by the Emmy Award-winning Siobhán Ní Thuathail of Danú Media, one of Ireland's most accomplished producers. From Ros na Rún to Báite and beyond, Siobhán has been at the heart of telling Irish stories on screen for decades. We chat about her career in broadcasting, the growth of the Irish language, and her vision for the future of media in the West.
It's the only rural drama in the country. It's the biggest independent production in the country. It's a huge employer in the industry, in the West in particular, but actually, nationally it's up there. We headed off and we won the Emmy, and then the same series about 2 years later we won a second one. Yeah, so it was an amazing opportunity.
Garry Talks Film, kindly supported by Grace on Demand Skillnet and the Rap Commission.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Siobhán, Fáilte G, GK Media Studios, thank you so much for joining me on Garry Talks Film. It is amazing to have an Emmy Award-winning producer on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Garry. An bhuíochas sásta bhain.
Tell me about going to the Emmys. What was that experience like?
That was one of those surreal moments. At the time, I was working with Telegael in Spiddal, doing a lot of international animation projects. One of them was one called Tuttenstein for Discovery Kids, and it was a co-production with the US company called Porchlight. And every project brings its trials and tribulations. There's days you're going, why are we doing this? And then we got word that we had been shortlisted for an Emmy, which really was, amazing.
Yeah.
Living in Spiddal, working in Spiddal, 5 miles from where you grew up. And I remember meeting up with friends of mine a night or two beforehand, and one of my friends was like, what are you wearing? And I was like, sure, I'm sure I have an old dress there. And she was like, oh my God, will you go to town? And so thankfully I took her good advice and came in to go. I was like, maybe I need to buy some kind of guna. So we headed off and we won the Emmy, and then the same series about 2 years later we won a second one. Yeah, so it was an amazing opportunity. I remember waking up the morning after, you ring your mum and your dad and your significant other, and then I remember waking up in the hotel room looking over and seeing the statue, beside your bed, and you're like, wow, that's something I hadn't envisaged, and the stars aligned. And some years it's to do with who you're up against and divided votes or whatever. There was all kinds of theories because we were one of the few independent productions that was nominated, so a lot of them would have been for the big Disneys or so it was kind of, we genuinely went there thinking we haven't a hope. So I think that makes it all the sweeter on the night. Yeah, so it was amazing. Yeah.
Do you remember meeting any stars or anything?
I don't remember. Like, we were in with the craft of the daytime Emmys, so there was a lot of people there that I wouldn't have known, if you know what I mean. But they were clearly
big in their field,
big in America. But it was on in Hollywood Boulevard where they hold the Oscars. We actually hired a limo. We went all out, hired a limo. The one thing I do remember is everybody kind of went home fairly early. We were like, woohoo, we won an Emmy. The Irish contingent were like, where are we going next?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, okay, so off we go. There wasn't a big sense of a late, or if there was, we weren't invited anyway to the big late party. So remember, we went back to the hotel we were staying in with an Emmy each in our hand kind of thing, going, right, what do you have to drink, And I remember coming home on the plane. Yeah, it was mad. It was like, do you walk through the airport carrying this? And then you feel like a bit of a, So I wrapped it up in my coat and stuck it in a plastic bag, and going through the X-ray machine. The guy was like, is that an Emmy in your bag? I was like, yeah, it is, because I was like, I can't really walk through LAX because, I just felt a bit, what an imposter syndrome.
I remember when I got married, the travel agent said, just tell everyone it's your honeymoon. So I went around telling everyone in America, it's my honeymoon.
Get all the free drinks. Yeah. You hear those stories.
Yeah, so the next time you win an Emmy or an Oscar, just
there you go.
Keep showing it.
Well, it was funny because on the flight home, I was sitting beside this random guy. I don't know his name. Maybe he'll listen to this. And we were chatting away. Oh, you're in LA. I was over for work. He was like, oh, they were an Irish musicians. And he said, we've been over for a few days. I was like, oh, that's great. And he was reading, I think it was the Irish Times. I don't know how he'd got his hand on an Irish newspaper. Maybe he was reading it online, and he goes, where are you from? Galway. Oh yeah. He goes, geez, I just saw in the paper some company from Galway won an Emmy last night or the night before. I was like, oh yeah, that was me. He was like, what? Oh, he goes, where is it? I was like, it's up there in the bag and wrapped in my coat. And he said, take it down till I see it. So next thing, kind of all hell broke loose, and they took out their instruments, started playing trad music. There was this little girl, Irish, dancing up and down the aisle, and the Aer Lingus pilot was like, we'd like to congratulate, and giving us champagne. So that was pretty nice moment,
brilliant.
you know. So one of those impromptu kind of moments.
That's mad. It wasn't until you got on the plane with the Irish going back home that the celebrations really began.
In typical Irish style, I think, you know. But he was so like, why have you got it wrapped up? I was like, sure, you know. He's like, can I? So kind of got passed around the whole plane. Yeah, it was great fun. Yeah,
because we are very kind of shy and sharing our big wins and our moments of glories.
Completely. I think that's just how or certainly how I was brought up. I think that's our kind of default, is you don't kind of like to talk yourself up too much, which I don't think is a bad thing, to be honest. Whereas, you know, I think other countries, maybe in America in particular, they tend to be, and genuinely, like, you know, Americans were like, oh my God, like random punters in the street walking home that night were like, can I take a picture with you? And in my head I was going, sure, you don't know who I am from the back of a bus, but sure, go for it if you want to, you know. So there's that really positive kind of view that I really like, or there was anyway in America at the time. It was like, congratulations, and genuinely, or it felt, you know, it felt like they genuinely thought that was an amazing thing to achieve, you know. So amazing.
You said that you were working in Telegael at the time, and we'll work our way up to, you know, all the successes that you have had along the way. But what did you start doing when you started working in Telegael, which for those who don't know is, well, at the time that I knew, it was mostly a post-production house.
Yeah, mostly post-production. So I finished college around the time TG4 started, so I'm showing my age there now. But I remember my dad was actually on Concorde Tina G. He was involved. He was on the kind of board that was involved in the establishment of TG4. So I definitely would have been aware of what was coming up, or that there was something amazing happening. I remember And
you grew up in an Irish-speaking family.
And I grew up, so I grew up in Furbo, the Furbacha, a Garry Talks, but really the reality was not a lot of households would have spoken Irish day to day, but we were one of the few. You could probably name on one hand. I won't start naming them, but there was a few families that did. My dad was a Limerick man. My mom was from Indravaughan. So he was very passionate about the language all throughout his life. So our house was definitely and went to UCG then, did a degree in Irish and economics. Really hadn't a clue. At one point I was saying, I'll do primary school teaching. And I remember I rarely heeded or took advice from my father, but he was like, don't do that, because if you're 17 and if you do that, then you'll just go teaching and that's where you'll stay, which would be fine. But he's like, you're very young, so why don't you do something broader, and you can always do a postgrad if that's what you decide, you know. So I mean, I had finished, it was a 3-year degree. I'm not sure if arts is still a 3-year degree. It was a 3-year degree at the time. So by 20 I had finished college and still had no idea. So there was an OR diploma, it still exists, OR diploma Commercides Feimach, applied communications in the university. Had an absolute ball. It was a year-long course.
And did you know what direction you wanted to go after?
Not really, but that kind of landed on my lap, so I did it. So that was in TV and radio production. So cool. Really useful, really hands-on. We went for a month to Orsichain and Caro, and you got to make little documentaries, and, you know, and it was great. So did that and definitely got the bug, I suppose. Loved what I was doing, loved all aspects of it, really. Always thought I wanted to be an editor. In hindsight, I'm not sure why, but that was always that was the bit of the practical work I enjoyed the most.
Because I remember when I was did film and TV, Lelia Doolan was one of my lecturers, and I always wanted to be a director or an actor. And Lily was coming in talking to us about her career pathways, and she said, Garry, you will be a brilliant producer.
Okay.
And I just felt like the rug was pulled from under me, because I don't want to be a producer. There's no glory, and I want to be a director or an actor.
People used to push me in front of camera, and it's really not something I ever wanted. But I often got, you be the presenter, or, do a screen test for this, that. At the time, TG4 were looking, but I really disliked anything, and still I'm allergic to even having my photo taken, to be honest. It's just not me.
So you're delighted to hear this podcast is being filmed.
I was
today.
Thrilled, absolutely thrilled. But anyway, we'll just forget that for a while.
So if you wanted to be an editor, as producing came along, was that something that you were kind of pulling away from?
Yeah, that was just producing is not really an entry level place. To my mind, you have to kind of start and work your way up. And I think the best producers, and indeed directors I've worked with, are the people who started in other positions and learnt their craft. And I think to have that broader knowledge of what you're doing and what everybody within your team is doing makes you a better producer and director. That would be my view of it anyway. So I never thought I was going to walk out the door and be a producer, or, I thought editing or working in the production department maybe. So I, at the time, Roger Corman had started the studio in Inverin in 1995. So I would have finished my postgrad in 98, and TG Ceathair was like 2 years. Like, I'll take a step back. I remember the night TG Ceathair opened, I was in college, and we were invited to some party in the Connemara Coast through my dad, and I was a bit like, oh.
Was it New Year's Eve or something?
It was Halloween.
Halloween, okay.
And I remember going down there, and I was a bit of a reluctant passenger, but my mother was like, hey, come on, we have to go, and, this is special. And I knew it was special, but actually they had all these big screens, which you see everywhere now, but at the time they had this wall of TVs, and I remember it was like a countdown, 10, 9, 8, whatever, I can't even count, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it started, and I can still remember that opening sequence, over the cliffs of Moher and everything, and I remember actually getting a bit emotional, and I would have been like 19 at the time, going, wow, this is actually this is a special moment in time for this country and for this industry, but really for the Irish language, and for those of us who grew up speaking Irish without even one single program for it, even in that context, so roll the clock forward, 98, finished college, a different economy to the economy we have now. Jobs were hard got. There wasn't a whole lot going on, to be honest. And I remember being in the car with my parents, and an ad came on Radio Ghadhra, like the small ads like you'd have on, any radio station. And they were saying, Concorde and Ish are looking for production assistants, entry-level positions, whatever. I was like, sound, I'm going to apply for that. So I rocked up for an interview, wearing a full suit and the whole lot. I laugh now because I'm so aware of how casual the industry is, but I rocked up like I was going for an interview in a bank or something. And still, the people who interviewed me, I subsequently became friends with, and they were like, I could see you from here walking in, and did an interview that didn't go really well and did not get the job. And they were like, yeah, no, but another position came up, which was as a PA, as in a personal assistant to the US producer, rather than a production assistant kind of out closing a road or something on set. So I think they thought because of the suit that I wasn't willing to get my hands dirty. I think that was kind of in subsequent conversations.
You must be out in the rain,
and I'd literally do anything. Like, I'm not in any way precious and never was, but I think kind of this consensus was with the cut in me that I wouldn't kind of cut it out in the rain or whatever. So I got to start working in Concorde, and I had a full driver's license. I always say that when I'm giving talks to students. Like, I think that really was a factor and a helpful thing for me, because I was kind of useful in that regard. So, started working that summer with Concorde and stayed there until Concorde closed, for like 2.5 years. Did 5 or 6
would the US
films.
Producer be Roger Corman, or would it be
No, it was a guy called Mike Flanagan. So he was over producing it. So they used to come over and produce a number of films at a time. A different producer, not always, but different producers would come over. So he was here. So he would have taught me how to use industry software like Movie Magic budgeting and scheduling. Really, I learned a huge amount. And I got to, because I didn't have a particular job to do, if you like, I got to kind of stand back and observe a lot of what was going on. So I became useful then to drive like actors to set, or, so I'd often end up on set rather than stuck in the office, which was great, and became great friends. There was lads I knew from back our way and the transport department location. So they kind of, I would say, took me under their wing. We could be playing cards at lunchtime, but I was very lucky, that I could stand back and see what everybody was doing and kind of learn as I was going. I hadn't a clue. I literally didn't know what anything meant, even the terminology on a walkie, how to use a walkie, a call sheet, like the basics, knew absolutely nothing really. So to get in there and get that hands-on experience from people who were really, really generous with their knowledge and their time.
But it's amazing, because what Ros na Rún has become now is like, that was a big thing when Concorde and Ish and TG Ceathair, or Tina G at the time, opened up in the West, and the knock on it is affected it's had over the last number of decades. But Ros na Rún, has very much replaced that training and apprenticeship and complete industry experience for people now, with Concorde gone and all that. And thankfully the hours aren't as long and crazy as some of the stories from Concorde and Ish have been. But it's brilliant.
Concorde and Ish was crazy, and some people can be cynical about it. I would never say anything. I think that I would never say anything but positive things. And so many people still working in this industry got their opportunity there. And I think that's what the issue was. It was nearly a closed shop. It was very difficult to get your foot in the door of the TV and film industry more broadly badly at the time. So to be offered a job, and it was long hours and we worked very hard, but God, we had an almighty time doing it. We really did. And I'm still friends with people that I met then who'd kind of go, oh, Jesus, do you remember when you came in? And John and I were at a wedding recently of a guy who was a stuntman, who worked with us then. And, the story, we had the best of times and we learned so much. And I think a testament to that is how many of those people are still working at a senior level in the industry, So you have to... I still think that's the best way to learn, is to get in there and to be willing. You could literally be driving a guy to the airport, washing a horse box with a Brillo pad and sending an email to God knows whose agent, and all of the above. But I think that willingness to do that really helped me in my career. I was brought up in a household where you kind of worked, where you worked hard. You were expected to kind of chip in and help out and not be kind of moaning or whatever, and you try and bring that with you through life. I think it's a great way to try and rear your kids, a good attitude. I always say to people, a good attitude and a strong work ethic really can get you an awful long way,
So not throw you under the bus now, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about late 90s, west of Ireland. There isn't many jobs out there. Forward the clock now to 20 years later, the industry has grown. There's loads of work out there. Have you noticed a change in the mindset of those coming into the industry?
I think people coming in now a lot of them are graduates, which wasn't the case at the time. I think the people who are in this industry as a whole want to be in this industry, and that's a great thing. And you can see the people, honestly, the people you encounter who are kind of doing it because they think it sounds nice or whatever, they very quickly realize it is nice. It's great fun. No 2 days are the same, but it is also hard work, and it is the long hours, and it is the phone call at midnight going, oh, the actor missed his plane or whatever it is. So I think if you have, it is, when I say it's like a bug, once you're in there, I think it's very difficult to leave it if you get that passion for it, So I think younger people coming into the industry now are more qualified, which has pros and cons. I think there's certain departments within the industry that I don't think, I worry that the emphasis is becoming a bit academic on people coming into the industry. And I personally don't think you need to have a third level qualification. I think a lot of departments like camera and lighting, they're more like trades, and I think apprenticeships and I think hands-on experience are so important there. I don't think you can learn that in the classroom, but I think most people I encounter, and I'm not dissing third level education here, I think there's a role for it, but I think the best thing to do after college is to get in there at a junior level and get that hands-on experience. Yeah,
100%. If someone ever sends in a CV to us, I look for a showreel. I don't ask to read their thesis.
Yeah. And I think it's a balance of both, But I think, again, I get asked to speak at college graduate classes. I'm always like, get a driver's license. Just say yes to opportunities. Don't be, not in a way that you're putting yourself out there to be more than you are, but you have to be willing. Opportunities will come your way, and you have to believe in yourself and be brave. And obviously, don't say you're a DOP if you're a trainee camera, but at the same time, take the opportunities and really, yourself. and it's really, you remember the people. It is, I'm not saying it's about who you know, but you do remember the people you work with. I encounter people now who have a film screening at the Galway Film Festival. I was like, God, I remember when you were a trainee. And I love it. I love the fact that they're still there. So you encounter an awful lot of people. You work really closely with them. They kind of become your family. And I remember years ago, because I was from Galway, a lot of the Concorde people mightn't necessarily have been from Galway. So, you'd be going out and I'd be saying to my local friends, oh, we're all going to the Warwick, whatever, Friday night. Do you want to come? And they're like, oh no. I remember one of them said to me, God, you're so boring. All you do is talk about work. Do you remember the time? And she was like, it's just no fun for the rest of us who don't work in your industry. So there is a bit of that,
Absolutely.
But I think that's part of the passion. You remember the days and you remember the funny moments,
Yeah, I've been told that a few times by friends.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we know who the actor was.
And then if we're not talking about work, we're just talking about other films or other TV shows.
So it doesn't make for my friend who said it to me. She's like, I work in accounts. I don't bore you with how I'm like, I know, but it's a little more interesting.
So what were you doing in Telegael?
So then Concorde shut the studio in early 2000, I'd like to say. I did a very brief foray in Moon the Gaeilge, teaching Irish in Tuam as a sub-teacher for a while, but that wasn't for me, really, even though I had great crack doing it. And then I got a call from Brí Seoga, who owns a Boom Media now, who I would have known through her husband, who worked in Concorde. And she was working in Telegael at the time, and they needed somebody to come in to do some kind of general production office work. So I had kind of worked my way up in Concorde, if you like, and I was like an assistant production manager by the time I'd finished there on the 5th film. And so she needed a kind of a general office production person to work on dubbing cartoons from English into Irish for TGCar and RTE. So I said, yes, I will take that. I think it was a 2-month contract, maybe a 3-month contract. And then I was there for like over 10 years. So I then went directing voices. I went in there, and within a few months, I was directing the voice actors in the studio.
Because this is the thing, once you get into a place, doors and opportunities to open up.
100%.
There's so much going on.
You meet somebody, there's so much of that involved in this industry. So, they needed somebody. They said, would you be interested? I was like, oh, can I do it? But feck it, I'll give it a go. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not allowed. Am I allowed to say feck it? Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I was, honestly, I had some great, technical sound people who definitely knew more than I did on that side of it. Worked with some fantastic actors, kind of shadowed some directors there for a while. The fabulous Sean Marchu, who passed away sadly since, and Ona Rieder, the two that spring to mind, who kind of helped me along, And then from there, the job was advertised as head of production. I applied for that, got that, and then ultimately was COO. And when I left the company, so Telegael became a lot more involved in international co-production. Yes. So I would have kind of headed up that side of the co-production. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. Amazing times. Worked with lots of amazing people. Got to travel a lot. Again, you work very hard, long hours. As somebody said to me, the world of co-production never sleeps. You're dealing with people in Sydney and China and India and LA. So to find even a time to have one meeting can be tricky to find a time on the clock that works for everyone. So, but yeah.
Like, do you embrace that? Because you're... I mean, it's a nice way, but you're always so busy. I mean,
as I said, there's always something to be done around the house. I love nothing better than clean the shed on a Saturday, or sorting out a cupboard, or so I'm a very organized person, and I'm a very tidy person to the point of ridiculousness, as all of my children and my husband like to tell me. Like, I like the house to be, but like if you rang me now and said, where is X, I could literally point you to the shelf. Like, I'm the person who has the labels on the kitchen presses. I am that person. But like, it's a really busy house. We have 4 kids. I work with my husband, John Brady.
So he works in the industry as well. So like, that's tough when you're rearing a young family.
Yeah, so we work together, and 4 kids and a dog. So I need to be, as I say, I have to be that organised, because I need to be able to find the football boots and the dancing shoes and the swimming togs and whatever it is. So, it's funny, because I was away at the weekend, and my eldest daughter, who's 17 now, was like, I had to do so much and nobody appreciated it. She's like, I was ironing the school uniforms and and I was like, welcome to my world. I said, you're only annoyed because you had to do it one weekend because I had asked her to give me a hand, I was like, that is it. But I like to be organised. I think you have to be. And for me, I just find I can't even, even in my own personal space, my bedroom, I like it to be tidy. I find it, if it's messy, I'm kind of not able to relax. So, but I do like to be busy. I think it keeps you sharp. I don't know.
So where do you actually get the headspace?
I really enjoy what I do. Like, I would rarely be going, oh, we all have our days. There's good days and bad, but it's very varied. I do a lot of different work on a lot of different projects. We have a great team working with us. Great people, who I know I can ring up and give out to, or not give out to, or have a moan about what somebody else to, or, so who have my back. And, at the end of the day, it's about, when John and I set up Danú together, the main reason we set it up was like, we wanted to pick our own projects and to be working on stuff we cared about, rather than working as, so he had spent years working with other producers as a kind of producer for hire, that in itself. And that was kind of about 10 years ago, reading scripts and books and plays and chatting to people. And to be honest, you read an awful lot of stuff that isn't for you. That's not to say that that it's not good, but it's just not for you or not for our company. And then you find the gem and you read it and you go, oh, that's a really nice story. You can nearly picture it in your mind. Like even this morning, one of the people on our development team was pitching an idea to me, and straight away I'm like, I would watch that. I could see that on X and I would watch it. And that is, so then it's like, how can we fund it? How can we pitch it? Where do we sell it? So we're lucky, I know people who have different careers who maybe don't get that level of excitement, but there is something, you find yourself, like we had a film screening at the Fla, and you find yourself weirdly emotional and slightly nervous. And it won. Yeah. But like, everybody's saying, are you excited? Because we had a kind of little party beforehand. And I was like, it was like this nervousness, because I've seen this film 100 times at this stage. Yeah. Like, I think it's fantastic. Of course I do. But what is a crowd of, 300 people going to think, and how are they going? Thankfully, they liked it and they clapped and they stood up and all that. But there it is. You're kind of exposing your soul in a way to an audience, and nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Doesn't matter how experienced you are as a producer, you still never know how the audience
reacts. Feel I think it's a really difficult thing to do, is that screening, and you're going, God, what are people? And you can be very critical of things yourself. Like somebody was saying, when you watch it, what's going through your mind? And I said, when I watch it, I'm going, that was the day this happened. And if only we had done that. I said, I'm spotting all the little things that hopefully nobody else is spotting that I would have done a little bit differently. But you have to be proud of the work you're doing, and that's important for us. Yeah.
So, because that was going to be one of my questions, like, when did you decide that there's a certain direction I want to go in my career? But that's when yourself and your husband John set up Danú Media.
Yeah, so we set up Danú Media. We had 2 small children, another one on the way. I was working a lot of hours, doing a lot of travel, and I suppose I felt I had kind of got sucked more into the business side and the contracts and stuff rather than actually making content. So it was we came to a crossroads, and we decided that we would go out on our own. And thankfully that all worked out. And then around the same time.
Now, when you say you went out on your own, you've 2 smallies at home, and third one on the way.
Yeah.
How deeply did you think about that decision? Was there fear?
I think there's always a fear. You're like, well, what are you doing? But like we had kind of said, look, I'd be the eternal optimist anyway. So I'm like, it'll work out. We'll get there. And in the meantime, then an amazing lady called Máire Ní Thuathail approached me, who was thinking of retiring from Ros na Rún. So that was a really interesting phone call. Like she actually rang John first and said...
So were you working in Telefish at the time?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
so I wasn't working there at the time.
And Telefish was running Ros na Rún.
Telefish was running Ros na Rún. So I actually did not know Máire Ní Thuathail very well at that stage. And she called John one night and said, I'm looking to future planning the business. I'm thinking of retiring in a few years' time. I'm trying to find somebody, with good production skills, Irish speaker, whatever. Would you know of anyone? And he was like, in our house going, leave it with me kind of thing. And he got off the phone. He goes, well, she's definitely looking for you, but she didn't say as much, I was like, oh, whatever. So, and then he went off to London for something the next day, and he had rang me and he was like, did you call her yet? And I was like, no, I'll do it later kind of thing. And which would be me. And then she actually rang me. And then as we became very firm friends, I realized she was one of the most impatient people ever, as am I, slightly impatient. So I knew she said, I knew you'd ring me eventually, but I just couldn't wait. So I remember we went for lunch in O'Grady's in Barna, and she kind of set out her stall that she wanted to retire in a few years, but that she wanted to kind of, I suppose, sell the business or give the business to somebody who would kind of run with it, but who had an interest in Irish and Ros na Rún and the brand that is Ros na Rún and the employer that is Ros na Rún and all of those things. So I said to her, I'm 4 months pregnant, or, it wasn't kind of, and she was like, oh yeah, okay. So she said, would you come in and work for a year as kind of like a consulting producer, just to see the lay of the land? She's like, it may not be for you. It may not be your cup of tea, but if you were interested. So we agreed to that. So I went in to her, and I have been there since. So Maura sadly passed away 9 years ago, just this past September. And that came...
Yeah, so she didn't know she was sick at the time she made that phone call.
No, she had no idea. So that would have been in... I'm trying to think of the maths now. My son was born in May 2014. I think I started there around February 2014. And then she got sick in 2016 and in April and passed away in September 2016. So I had done my year. We were looking at how to structure it. We bought out her company and the facility and everything in Spittle. And then she called me one day and said, I've just got some bad news. We need to move quickly on this. So poor Maura only had a few months, like 5 months from when she first got sick. So we had to kind of fast track all of the paperwork basically, but it was all agreed, and she was an amazing woman and very inspirational to me, I have to say. A lot of people would say that in the industry. I got to work very closely with her, and in her last few months I got to spend an awful lot of time with her, and I was privileged to do so, so she was fantastic. Yeah.
What do you think you learned the most from Máire Ní Thuathail?
I think one of her strongest traits was that she really didn't care what anybody thought of her, which is something I often struggle with. I kind of some people would say you like to be liked. Like I don't like confrontation a huge amount. I just don't see a need for it. Like I think you can be firm. I think you need to be kind. I think people have a lot of stuff going on, and I'd like to think that you treat people who work with you well and respectfully, but that sometimes you have to stand your ground, but that doesn't mean you have to be nasty at the same time. You have to stand your ground. So I think I definitely suffered from kind of worrying, oh God, I can't do that because what will they think? Or maybe they were going to do something similar or whatever. Whereas she was very much going, you do you, I suppose, to use that phrase that teenagers use now, that you have to kind of paddle your own canoe, make your decisions. I think I'm lucky that I work with my husband, so our decision-making process is very aligned. If we decide to do something, we can say, hey, I was thinking about A, B, and C. And it's literally, that's the conversation. And I love that freedom. I suppose working for myself, they're the two things I like the most. I am an impatient person, so I like to be able to make decisions, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes they don't work out, sometimes they do. But I think I find it frustrating when there's prolonged kind of, when things take a long time to get over the line. I just find that difficult to deal with because that's not how I operate. And secondly, I like the flexibility it gives me because I think it's really, really hard for people in any industry, but particularly in our industry, if you have personal commitments, if your kids are young or you have an older parent or whatever, those days where you get, and it happens, school sends you the text saying, the school plays at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And there's a lot of people don't have the privilege of being able to say, I can move my day and get to see my child play their football game or go to their play. And I think that's tricky. So I always try the people who work with me to be as flexible as I can. Like, as long as the work gets done is kind of and I know they like that. And I know equally if I rang them at 10 o'clock on Saturday night saying, I have a problem, I need whatever, they're there for me. So it's a two-way street, but I think that respect and just a bit of empathy, I think, is important.
I definitely think when you become a parent, you become a lot more empathetic to those situations when others are in them because you've gone through them yourself. Completely.
Like I think before I had kids myself, if somebody rang me and said your child is sick, I'd be like, why is that my problem? Like honestly, I just was like, and now I get it. You drop it, you run, you go. I mean, and that's how it should be. And you're lucky if you find yourself in employment. That's not easy to do. If you're employed on a film set, that is not the reality of it. If you're employed by an overseas film producer, he doesn't care that your child has a football game. They want you to do your 12-hour day or whatever it is, So I think that attitude is changing a bit. And I think we lose a lot of good people in this industry for that reason. It's not very family friendly.
No.
Now, having said that, I don't know that there's another way to do it either. Like, I think there's certain parameters around how the work has to be done. So I don't know how much, but like, I think that's why Russ the Rune has such, like, we have some crew members who've been there nearly since day one. And I think somebody said to me once, like, it's hard work. The work is done. It's a challenging schedule, but they said it's as close as a 9 to 5 as you're going to get in this industry.
True.
And it's local. Like, so if you want to rear your kids, particularly in an Irish language context, if you want to live in the Gaeltacht and speak Irish to your kids and have a job in this industry, and it's over the winter months as well, when there really isn't a whole lot, certainly regionally, happening in the industry. It's as close as a 9 to 5. So, we shoot a 40-hour week. Most film sets are 50-hour week plus lunch. And, you have a steady work for 6 months. So it's important, it's an important part of the infrastructure, I think.
How do you and John actually get on as a creative
Fantastically.
couple? Because I know couples who are both creatives working in the industry, and it does work when you're married to someone who also is in the industry or certainly understands the industry. So like my wife is the film programmer, so she gets the terminology and where I'm coming from with my thinking and so on. But I know couples as well who are creative and just, when you're in their kitchen on a Saturday morning, there's just clash.
We don't tend to clash. I think like we are literally chalk and cheese. You couldn't find like how we ever hooked up or got married or became friends is really like about everything. We are chalk and cheese, but it works. Like we complement each other and we would share the same values, I think. We are known to have our moments. I remember saying to one of the people who works with us one day, because I think we hold each other to a higher standard, and the way sometimes at meetings we kind of hold each other versus other people who work with us. And I remember saying to one of the girls in the office, I said, it's probably really awkward when myself and John are a bit, on a meeting. And she was like, oh, well, we do joke mom and dad are fighting again, So I thought that was brilliant. I was like, okay, we need to temper that a little bit. But it's, I think I've often said this publicly, I don't know if I was married to a teacher or a plumber or a carpenter, because like I travel a lot, John travels a lot, that brings with it the other person therefore takes on the responsibility for that period of time. There's a trust issue. Our industry, would be one that, I think you really need to trust your partner. But like, I know 1000% I have his back and he has mine. And I think that's what makes it work. And we bounce ideas. Like we don't really share the same taste. Even reading a script, we wouldn't always, but we can see the value of it. So we kind of have projects that are his projects. It works really well. We work from home a bit. We share an office. Like, we drive each other nuts at times, but nothing too detrimental.
What was COVID like when you actually weren't traveling anywhere and missing each other? You were actually stuck in the same room.
Yeah, well, you see, up until then, John would have worked a lot in other productions around the country. So he could have been gone, and at that stage we had 4 small kids. Our youngest was only, let me do the maths, 3 when COVID kicked in. So at that stage, John could go off for, 3 months at a time, go off to Dublin working on a movie, come home on the weekends. Really hard on him, to be honest. Harder on him than it was on me socially. I think he missed the kids and they definitely missed him. He and I are big enough and bold enough, but I think by a Friday evening, he'd be dying to get home. And then when COVID kicked in, Danú wasn't long and we had just kind of finalised the deal with the Hotel Fiche, and that had taken a bit of time to make sure that was up and running properly. And then we were kind of saying, well, actually, let's just not do that gun for hire. So we had to sit down. We were like, let's not do the gun for hire work anymore. Let's not be gone for 3 months of the year. Like, and it's funny because our kids would still sometimes say, do you remember when Dad used to be gone? Like, and I'm like, yeah, because he was working. And like loads of families have to do that. Loads of families have to do that all year round. We were lucky in a way it was just a few months here and there, but that was the reality of where the work was for him at the time. So then we decided to, develop our own projects, get more involved in the creative. And I suppose we both then, you can get so caught up in the production and the finance side of it that you forget that what you actually really love is sitting down with a good script or giving notes on a script or, and sometimes you kind of go, actually, I really enjoyed that discussion as opposed to filling in another form or whatever it is. So we were lucky then we got support from Screen Ireland, which was fantastic. They had a few company support initiatives going on around that time to allow you to develop projects. So that was
like
great.
A Slate funding.
Like a Slate funding, so to get that support meant a huge amount to us as a company. It allowed us to go out there, option IP, work with writers, not expect writers to work for nothing, which used to be a thing. And I really disagree with it. Everybody has their bills to pay. So, you may not be able to pay top dollar, but everybody should get paid for their work, in my view. Yeah. So to get that support from Screen Ireland was really hugely important to us as a company, and it allowed us to take that time, find a few projects. We have a few lovely projects on our slate that were just various stages of development, trying to get out to the market, and that gave us that kind of space to breathe, and that was amazing. Yeah.
And just taking it back to when you bought out Hotel Fiche and it later evolved into Danú Media, how do you go about financially buying that beast of a production company?
Yeah, we were very lucky. It was very much a discussion with Máire and our accountant, who's an amazing guy called Philip Fitzgerald, and we were able to sit down and work out mutually, I suppose, a price and a structure, and we were able to borrow against it thanks to our bankers. So, I mean, it wasn't, a price was agreed, a payment schedule was agreed, and we were able to secure the bank finance for it. So that was it. We were lucky in that, having Russ in the room there, I suppose, is a cornerstone.
I suppose you needed a guarantee from TG Carr that they were continuing with the show as well.
There's no guarantee from TG Carr. like there still is no guarantee from TG Carr. So it's in a 3-year kind of tender process. But who knows? Like you have to be. It's so important to Russell Roon. You have to be kind of like that is our for me. That's one of my biggest babies, obviously in a work capacity. Like we have to be hitting that with our audiences, with our scripts, with our storylines.
30 years.
30 years this year. Yeah. So you know, it's so important for me that is, you know, the integrity. Like the very first conversation with Máire Ní Thuathail, she's like, I need somebody who's going to look after and have and care for, I suppose, Russell Roon, and that's important, you know, for me. On all kinds of levels, like it's important that we're serving that audience. Like it's important that we're serving not only that Irish speaking audience, which obviously is our key audience. There's a whole English speaking audience out there that Russell Roon has. Yeah. It's the only rural drama in the country. It's the biggest independent production in the country. It's a huge employer in the industry in the West in particular, but actually, you know, nationally it's up there. We work very closely with TG Carr, who've always been hugely supportive, but like, you know, I'd love some guarantees, but sure, none of us have guarantees and anything. None of us know. Yeah. It just so we protect it. We put a lot of energy into it. We are constantly kind of trying to evolve it. You know, our story team do an amazing job coming up with storylines. I love to.
You've had like some really cool people on the show as well, like Conan O'Brien and stuff.
Yeah, Conan O'Brien
super jealous when that happened.
That was amazing, and it's funny because they had reached out to us. And I hope he's not listening. They had reached out to us around, and then there was writer strikes. And anyway, it kind of got pushed a bit. So they kind of reached out and we were like, yay. And then it was like, oh no, it mightn't happen. So we kind of parted. The next thing, it happened with quite short notice. And I was a bit like, oh, you know, I don't know how he, you know, is he going to be a nice guy? I have to say he was just an absolute gent. You have a preconception that probably says more about me than anything. And he, you know, I was like, you know, this could be hard work, but he came in, he was so gracious, so nice, good fun. He literally went to all the crew, who wants a selfie with me? Come over here. Do you know, and sometimes you don't get that depending on the profile of the person. But as people go, he was just so good to deal with. The people who were with him were amazing. You know, he just literally wanted a cup of tea and a bag of potatoes. That was kind of, you know, we were like, do we need anything? Or, you know, so it was fabulous. And the exposure we got from that was absolutely insane, you know.
It's great to hear when they're nice. Because, you know,
totally,
there's so many out there who have one persona. When you actually get to meet them or know them, it's,
you know, he was just lovely. And you kind of, those days arrive and you're going, oh, in your head, you're like, how is this going to play out? But actually it was fabulous, very positive. He was amazing. Because it's always kind of tricky when they want a cameo in the show, because like we're writing scripts months and months ahead. Then somebody's in saying, oh, you know, because, you know, Steve Carell was around Galway there a few weeks ago.
That's right.
And I think Paddy Powers was taking bets that he was going to have a cameo in Russell Roon, which unfortunately he didn't. But somebody then said to me, he had been in Inishmore, and someone I know who's involved in the tourism, I was like texting going, hey, how's it going? Are you touring around with Steve Carell? Because, you know, if he'd like to pull a pint tea high, that would be achievable, you know? And he goes, I was. He said, but he flew home yesterday. I was like, oh, if only I'd known. But, you know, it's great to get those. You know, at the end of the day, they're fantastic. Daniel O'Donnell went down an absolute treat. So it's great to get them, but you have to always bring it back to, it's about the audience. It's about, like we had Culture Night the 19th.
Huge success.
And the studio opened, and you know, the emotion, honestly, meeting, I think you can kind of forget how exciting it is for the real world. So you go in there every day, you're walking around the streets of Russell Roon and you're just kind of thinking about the next thing on your to-do list. And then people travelled width and breadth of the country to come and visit the studio. And the actors were amazing. They all stayed back and did a Q&A with them and tea and sandwiches. And, you know, it just interests me. And these are just, you know, I don't, like regular people, our audience, these are the people we're there to serve. So like we could only take a certain number because of our insurance and stuff. Like we had twice that on a waiting list of people, and they travelled from like Kilkenny and Tipperary and like all over the country. And and I kind of snoop incognito on the Russell Roon fan pages, you know, just to see what, I like to keep an eye on what they're saying, which is generally positive. So that's a good thing. But, you know, one person had up there, oh my God, I got to visit studios. That literally was the best day of my life. I've never experienced, you know, so, you know, that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Well, it's such a cool set.
Yeah.
You know, it's so cool walking around there and then seeing the person you've seen on TV for so long there in person and they're smiling and waving at you. It's a very kind of surreal moment.
And I think I've had those moments where you say hello to somebody because you know them off the telly and sure they don't know who you are from the back of a bus, because our cast are amazing. And you have to remember that they're just people trying to make a living as well, So they work in Russell around 6 months of the year and do other gigs and other work the other 6 months of the year. But they've been fantastic and they're so loyal and they're such good brand ambassadors, if you want to use that phrase. They're, and people come up to them all the time. Are you your man? And they're fantastic. Yeah.
Brilliant. So talk to me now about the success of Danú Media. Like you had Sanctuary. You're behind that,
so I was on the board of Blue Teapot, so I was the exec producer for the Blue Teapot Theatre Company. Danú were not involved in that production, but I had an exec producer credit on it because I was a board member. Was delighted to be a board member of Blue Teapot Theatre Company here in Galway, who do amazing work, and I had the privilege to be, I think I was nearly 10 years working in the background there, and when Sanctuary was being filmed, I was on the board, so I was just kind of working at that side. But that was that movie. No thanks to me. That movie was amazing. Yeah,
you've been on a lot of boards, haven't you?
I do a lot of boards. Yeah.
I'm afraid of boards because they're so political.
I don't think they are. I kind of believe, I'm on boards that are interesting to me.
Who are you with at the moment?
So I'm with Creative Europe and I'm on the board of Oradon here in Galway, and I'm on the board of TG Cahir, and I'm the chair of the board of Over Ros currently.
That's 4 organisations.
That's 4 organisations, yeah. So it's amazing and all very varied. I'm very, my term in TG Cahir will be coming to an end this year, but I've been there for a good few years, an initial term and an extension. I'm a believer in giving things back. I find it interesting to hear. I find it useful to understand, not even the information from the board meeting, but the people on the board. You can get great insights, or even just hear on the ground what's happening, what's not happening, what should be happening maybe. And the board of Over Ros, I was approached about that last year, and that's somewhat different. Well, it is very different to my day-to-day industry, but huge privilege to be the chair of that board. And as a Gaeltacht person, Duine le Gaeilge, I think Over Ros's place in that is so pivotal, really, and to be able to be part of that and to work with an amazing team out there and the other board members to try and fight for, and do the best you can for the Gaeltacht regions. I think it's an honour, to be honest with you. It can be busy, but it's busy in a good way,
So you grew up in the Gaeltacht in the Firbica. And we've seen the country, especially through the Celtic Tiger, develop and improve so much in so many aspects. And I know Donegal call themselves the Forgotten County, but I do feel that the West, to a degree, has very much been forgotten by the industry. And you're on the ground, you've been in it for decades. We've been at the tables fighting for recognition and more support. What are your thoughts on where because the West has so much to offer, but I don't think that's been recognised by other parts of the country. What are your views on where we are at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose this is something John and I have been very passionate about. He's from Roscommon, I'm from Galway. We're living in Galway, we're in our kids. We were, like many others in this industry and other industry, the family that had dad or mom away for periods of time working in other parts. I mean, and I don't think it's a lack of goodwill. The notion of regional development is been discussed as long as I've been working in this industry. But the only thing that's going to develop the regions is more production in the regions. For a number of years there was the uplift in the Section 481, an extra 5%. That was a game changer. And definitely, I think, in fact, I know because I've looked at this and analysed it, more production was happening outside the Dublin Wicklow region when that was there. That has been, it brought its own issues because it was tied into European mapping and it was European approved. So the entire country didn't get it. For example, Cork was excluded. So it wasn't ideal, but it was something. Screen Ireland have the National Additional Production Fund, which is very helpful. But, again, there's some, if you're not a Screen Ireland funded production, for example, you can't access that. So it's kind of limited, unlike the tax credit, which is kind of straightforward. It's a percentage of your budget and away you go. So I've always said this, the only way to develop the regions is for more work to happen in the regions. I don't think every region, I think you have to focus on bigger centres within the regions or clusters within the regions. I don't think every town in Ireland can have a film studio. I don't think that's a sustainable model. If you look at the if you look even at Ardmore Studios was built and then the industry kind of built up around it. That's why everything is based up around there. And I think the infrastructure of, if you look at Troy, tried to do the same thing, wasn't quite as successful, but still there and still holding its own and doing amazing work to develop the Western region, if you like, down the Western seaboard. So I think you have to be aiming. At the end of the day, it'll come down to costs, and it does cost a bit more to shoot in the regions. So unless there's some financial incentive for overseas producers to shoot in the regions, the guy sitting in his office in LA is not going to say, oh, Galway's a lovely town, sure, we'll go there even if it costs X 100,000 more to do that. They're literally looking at dollars and cents and saying, where can I do this? I think we've a lot of positives in this country around, we've great crews, highly skilled, English speaking, strong tax credit, beautiful locations, but that depends on the project entirely. Yeah. I think our cost base has increased a lot in the last few years, and there's serious competition coming in now from lower cost economies. Our wage levels have gone really high to follow our very high inflation. So, that's it.
So kind of Eastern Europe is getting more of the take.
Well, I think, they're definitely an attractive prospect. But people do like the fact that we are kind of on the edge of Europe and English speaking, and since Brexit, we're the only English speaking actually territory left. So I think it's challenging. There's a lot going on politically, globally, as we all know, and there's definitely, I feel, internationally an uncertainty amongst funders, and they're more risk adverse than they were even 2 or 3 years ago, and they're looking at projects, So, there's talk of tariffs floating, all kinds of stuff floating, and that makes people nervous. So, even, we're talking to a number of US companies about projects at the moment, and there's a bit of, let's see how things play out in the next few months. And so that makes it difficult. But I think, I think when you have incoming producers coming in to shoot in a region, they don't care that you want to hire Garry from Galway. He's a nice guy and he's good at what he does. They say, give me 10 CVs. And the person with the most experience is the person they're going to want or fight for creatively or for whatever reason. And the reality is most of those people are Dublin or Wicklow based, because it's completely cyclical. It's a chicken and egg. You need more production to get people to get the credits so that you can attract more production and so on and so forth.
And for someone who's a born and bred Dubliner working in the industry, because I've kind of met these people and, they don't get it why people in the West are hungry for more productions. They're like, if they want the work, let them come over here to the Dublin Wicklow area.
And I've encountered that.
Yeah. And but what can we say to people who feel that everyone who wants to work in the industry just needs to lean over to the East completely?
Yeah, I think that's probably a few people in the industry, but I mean, it's the same. You could counter that and say, hey, why don't you come to Galway? It's the same argument, except I think we're not as good at fighting our case, I suppose. I think we tend to be a little quieter about it. Like there's no, I suppose, requirement for the regions, but I think it's been recognised as an industry that could work well regionally. The opportunities are there. We were involved in a few projects around infrastructure over the years that for one reason or another haven't gotten off the ground. But I think if you look at where industries have developed, if you look at what Belfast have done in the last 20, 25 years, there was no industry there. They built some fantastic studio facilities. They incentivised it. Northern Ireland Screen were central in it. They got in your Game of Thrones and away you go. There's a whole tourism industry apart from anything else. So the opportunities that are there are, there was a festival out in Spiddal a few weeks ago about John Ford. And so many people, we were involved in that, and so many people were like, Jesus, I never knew who he had, and never even heard of him. Didn't know it was involved in Spiddal. And you're just going there's so many ties. He apparently, and I only heard this during the festival, he wanted to shoot The Quiet Man around Spiddal, but they literally couldn't find enough accommodation for the crew and cast. So that's how they ended up in Ashford Castle in Cong, because Lord Callanan knew the owner of Ashford Castle. So they all went up there. John Ford wanted to bring it home to his home place, So all those logistical issues, hotels, costings are expensive. This country is really an expensive prospect at the moment. So I think that's an issue. And I think unless there's a tax incentive there to level the playing field, I think that's going to be the challenge for regional development. City Car is an amazing, we just did a film under the City Car umbrella. Amazing for City Car. This is Botsy,
Yeah, which one at the Fla? And it's over in Newport soon.
Yeah, we have our US premiere in Newport Beach on the 19th of October. So we're so excited to head over there. Shot in Galway. When was that? Last year, 2024. So shot all around Galway and a little bit of Mayo, but we won't admit to that. But just on the border, so we'll call it Galway. But that was an amazing shoot. But like, I suppose, I've said this to TG Carr, like City Carr is amazing, and the publicity for the Irish language, and but the reality is, a Cine Carr film would usually shoot for 5 weeks, and you might get one every year or two. So for crew on the ground, that's 5 weeks work every year or two. It's not a sustainable. Really, what you want to be getting to is, large scale studio facilities and long running TV series. If you look at Belfast, if you look at Dublin, and like if you look at Vikings in Ashford, if you look at Game of Thrones in Belfast, if you look at all, and there's more examples all over the world. If you look at where they managed to, because those no more than Russell Room, which is at a much different budget level in a domestic show, I guess. Longer running series, you can genuinely give people an opportunity straight in the door to learn their craft. And it's not a 5-week shoot, it's a 26-week shoot. And so you have a genuine opportunity to develop, learn, and hopefully step up in the second series or the third series, So really to develop the industry, I think that's where you need to be looking to put.
And who's the onus on then to make that happen? Is it the producers, the finances, the broadcasters, the writers even?
Everyone, really. I mean, you're probably realistically looking at international projects to get those long running series. There's no broadcaster in Ireland has the budget to do a long running TV drama series of scale that would do that. And I think most of the streamers, like the Disneys and the Netflix of this world, are really don't care where they shoot as long as it works well creatively, technically and financially. If the model works, then they're happy to look at that. So really, it's probably government policy around that tax credit for the regions is an important piece, and the infrastructure. I suppose a more friendly ecosystem would be useful, when it comes to permits and planning permission, and there's a lot of difficulties there. I mean, there was a few studio projects in the works all around the country in the last few years. Like the cost of construction has just gone through the roof. So really the viability it's hard to see unless you can get one of those super big projects. But like if you then, have a studio and I'm just saying this off the top of my head, let's say in Leitrim, if you have a studio, everybody's going to have to come in. At least Galway has some base of crew. At least Limerick has some base of crew. But if you have to bring everyone in, then you have to accommodate them all. You have to feed them all. You have to. Then the American is like, the American finance person is going, why am I spending all this money for beds? They want to see bang for their buck. They want to see it on the screen. So what you in my world, what you're trying to do is take the hit, if you like, on the first few, where you give people opportunities, and then over time you're developing your local crew to kind of step up and take those positions, so you could have a fully functioning crew that is regionally based. I mean, that's the dream. That's where you want to get to. But you're not talking overnight. You're talking, there's a few years. It's kind of what Corman was doing, really.
Yeah, it was.
You do, but you have to, you can get people to relocate to the regions. But gone are the days there used to be this, you could do it a bit cheaper and go away. Why would you? Why should you?
Yeah.
So what you really need is that continuity of work. You need to be able to, and in conversations, a studio is not like a B&B where you stick a door on the wall and say, hey, here's a studio here, come and get it. You have to, it takes years really to find the right project, to find the right, partners, so there's years to get there. So I think some certainty around the tax credit would probably be a big help. And then, I don't know, should there be some kind of, infrastructure, but then you have to kind of look at what's been planned and hasn't gone ahead, usually due to the cost of construction. I've no involvement in the studios that were, around the country. But why did they not go ahead?
It's we need some visionaries back in the country, like what we had when TG Cahar or Tina G was originally set up, and, incentivizing Roger Corman to come over, an American to come over and set up a studio in the west of Ireland. That kind of big thinking.
But it's funny, at the time when Roger Corman came here, a lot of people in the industry, particularly on the East Coast, there was this kind of, that's just Roger Corman. Whereas I've gone to lunch and dinner with people in LA, and you say you started your career at Roger Corman, you may as well say, they see him with, Scorsese and, all these big hitters in the industry who started with Roger Corman. That calling card is very strong internationally, actually, which is interesting.
So Báilte is doing the festival circuit at the moment.
It's doing the festival circuit at the moment. It's going to be in Newport Beach, a few other festivals off the top of my head, I can't remember, but like some European festivals. It's going to be at the Dingle International Film Festival in November. And we are working with Eclipse as our Irish distributor. So delighted to be working with them. And the aim is to have it in cinemas in March 2026. Hopefully a time with Seachtain na Gaeilge. Yeah. So,
excellent.
So we're working towards that at the moment, which would be nice. Really, you just want people to see it. Like, you know, you're not in it for the awards or whatever, but like you just want people to say it. It's amazing when somebody comes up and says, "Oh, you know, I saw your film. I really loved it." You know, that's a fantastic feeling. You know, so
it's brilliant. Like you've been working on Ross and Rune and Sail Ella, which was another great kind of for the younger people, shall we say, demographic, and doing movies as well, like Báilte, and it's very much still pushing through on the Irish language, which is wonderful to see. And there's been so much acknowledgement and appreciation for the Irish language as well over the last couple of years with the success that we've had. So where does Danú Media what sort of direction does it want to go in?
Yeah, I mean, we have always had a slate of Irish language projects. We do have a slate of English language. It's funny. I always say to people, yes, we do English projects. And yes, I do, because a lot of people think, I don't know if it's because my name, that we only do Irish language projects. So we have actually a much bigger slate of English language projects that we're developing at the moment. So we have optioned an amazing book called The Glorious Heresies by Lisa McInerney. So we're just bringing that to the market now. We've developed it as an 8-part TV drama series set in Cork. Lisa's writing is amazing. She's a Cork woman, but we will claim her as our own. She's living in Gort. So we're delighted to be bringing that out. We also have another series called 12 Pins. The writer is Sligo-based Ger, and that is a murder mystery kind of crime drama series set in the backdrop of the 12 Pins in Connemara. So again, speaking to some international funders about that. So, you know, it's a difficulty in this country, how the lack of funding, I suppose, for our public service broadcasters. So you really can't make them without going further afield. If you look at series Paddy Hayes did, you know, Obituary, a lot of the funding came from overseas, and that's the model. So that just takes time. You're literally knocking on doors saying, hello, we have this idea. So, and
are these the doors that you're knocking on, are these people you've already built a relationship up with over the years?
Some are and some aren't. So we have a UK producer we're talking to about Glorious Heresies, for example. Don't know him terribly well, but I've met him over the years. So sometimes you're just in pitching it to funders, broadcasters. The model has evolved, and the appetite for risk is definitely lessened. So, you have a project. Sometimes you might have to partner with the UK producer. Like we have a project that Netflix are interested in, but they're like, we'd need you to partner with the UK producer, which, you know, fair enough. So then you're trying to find the right partner, you know. So it just all takes a little bit of time.
Because deadlines and money changes people.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like we have 2 feature film scripts that we developed. One is based on a play by John B. Cain. It's absolutely gorgeous. But it's just like independent film is really hard to fund at the moment. So you either have to do it really kind of at a low cost base, or else go all out, and then you need to attract your Hollywood stars or nobody wants to know. So it's quite a balancing act. So like that, from day to day, you don't know what you're doing. But we have a few projects that we're hoping to, even just this morning, we were just talking to an agent about, you know, taking an option on another book and going out there. So our big thing is fail fast. You know, you're better off to get out and get, I suppose there's nothing, again, I'm impatient, but there's nothing worse than not knowing for months and months and weeks. So we're like, get out there. With maybe you don't have all the development done, but a good kind of concept, and either or take it or leave it kind of thing. But it's better, an answer, even a no is better than no answer at all, I suppose, you know. So that can be very difficult. You're just sitting around waiting to hear from people. So, yeah.
So you're saying that really to be successful in productions nowadays, you need to have a relationship with overseas producers. Yeah. So where do you get to build those relationships?
Really, it's kind of introductions from other people. We would attend a lot of the markets, Content London in New York. I was going to say Content London in London, strangely enough, in December is a great place to network. Okay. You have a lot of panels with international commissioners to hear what they want. They do a lot of case studies on dramas, so you can hear how other people put that pie. Really, it all comes down to the financing and how you can pull all those pieces of money together, because until you have that, really, you have nothing. So you can have the best script in the world. Like there was a great show called The Queen's Gambit a few years ago, and I think that was like nearly 20 years in development and got turned down by left, right and centre. So you need to be kind of dogged as well. Like you can't just, and that can be hard because, somebody says, no, it's not for us. You kind of can go off and lick your wounds. You can say, right, we'll park that for a while and we'll pick it up again later. And tastes change and staff within funders change. Like, there's a revolving door there. So the person who says no to you in one organisation might not be there in 6 months' time and you might get another bite of the cherry. So you have to be willing to just keep going, plugging away. There's days when you're going, what are we doing here? But you just have to keep plugging along. But we've our head of development, Nadine Flynn, she's fantastic. So she keeps pushing, and she's a background as a script editor, and Louise Richardson, who works with us as our our production executive, she's brilliant. And we have another person in development as well. Wow. Breedine, Wheel Colony, so they're going off to do a travel show actually for TG Cahir next week. They're going off to the UAE, so that's exciting. Wow. So they're talking about Gael and Aussie, like the Gael who live in the desert, like Irish speakers and young. They've amazing stories of people over there in different positions who are over there, not just your regular travel show, but what is your life actually like when you're living, that far away from home, but you are a Gaelic footballer or a trad musician or whatever, so looking forward. They're all heading off next Wednesday, so that'll be exciting.
Brilliant. 2 final questions,
okay.
Right? 1, what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a producer?
Always learn, like just be aware of what's going on around you. Like none of us have the answers. I say this to people all the time. Every day is a school day. I'd say there isn't a day in my career that I don't hear something and say, oh, didn't know that. Never heard of that. There's development funding available from here. Or did you know you can claim a tax credit on that? Oh, yeah. So I think just try and make contacts, try and network as best you can. I don't mean the sense of like getting jobs, but I just mean, meet people, try and chat away. You hear all kinds of information, or sometimes I met somebody last week and she was like, I'd be really interested in doing this. And then I sent an email to somebody saying, oh, if you're looking for somebody to do that, I just met somebody and she's good. And next thing you know, she's got a gig out of it, So I think those relationships are important, and take the opportunities. Like I said earlier, if an opportunity presents itself, even though, you have to try and not second guess yourself. Like I wouldn't consider myself a very confident person, but I was going to say I'd consider myself a bit of a chancer. I don't consider myself, but I'd have a go at anything. I'd kind of say, what's the worst that can happen? Worst can happen. So even when it comes to projects or, optioning something or, talking to a writer that has some profile or an actor even, I'm like, sure, what's the worst they can say? I always say to my kids, if you don't ask, you don't get. Like the worst thing you can do is not ask, because then you'll never know the answer to that question. So I think you have to try and kind of set aside any kind of fears you might have, and just, worst case, they'll say no. And sure, if they do, that's all right too. There's always another way, So the eternal optimist, I can't help it.
And what advice would you give to someone working with the producer?
Ooh. Never come to them with a problem unless you've had some thoughts on the solution.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm stealing that from my husband now, actually. But it's true. Like, don't come saying, oh, well, we can't park the car there next week. But we could park it somewhere else, or we could get a bus, or we could. So I just think, a producer's job really is logistics. Like there's different types of producers. So I wear a number of different hats. I exec produce a lot, which is the finance and the business side. And I love the creative side of it, of giving notes on a script or whatever. But I think when you're actually in the throes of it, when you're actually in production, producers want people, like I said earlier, with a good attitude, but also who are thinking. So, I'm blessed that Louise, who works for me, is that person. She is like, this came up, but I didn't bother with it, and we did that. And I'm like, super, brilliant. Yeah. So it's that constant kind of putting out fires. So I think to, try and be just kind of thinking outside the box, not to use a cliche, but Yeah.
I like it. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Garry
Talks. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thanks a million, Siobhán.
Yeah.
Well done. Garry Talks Film. Kindly supported by Grace on Demand, Skillnet and the Rap Commission.